She paid just $250 for a stone log home everyone said was cursed, walls thick as fortress gates, windows like empty eyes staring into nothing. Maya Sullivan thought she was buying a place to start over after losing everything. But hidden in the attic behind a wall that shouldn't exist was a safe the size of a refrigerator. And inside it, $230 million that would turn her life into a battlefield where the past refused to stay buried and powerful people would do anything to claim what she'd found. Before we explore the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning her grandmother died, Maya Sullivan sat alone in a hospital waiting room that smelled like disinfectant and broken promises. She was 23 years old, wore second-hand jeans with a patch on the knee, and had $700 to her name. The nurse had touched her shoulder with practiced gentleness and said the words people always say when there's nothing left to say. She's at peace now. But Maya wasn't at peace. She was alone. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 9, and her grandmother Rose had raised her in a tiny apartment above a laundromat in Denver. Rose had worked 3 jobs to keep them fed, to keep Maya in school, to keep hope alive when the world felt heavy. And now she was gone. The funeral was small. Just Maya, a few of Rose's friends from the church, and a priest who'd never met her grandmother but spoke about her like he had. Maya stood at the grave, hands shaking, wondering how you're supposed to keep going when the only person who ever believed in you is 6 feet underground. After the burial, Maya returned to the apartment. It felt smaller now, emptier. The walls still held Rose's cross-stitch samplers and faded photographs, but the warmth was gone. Maya sat on the floral couch her grandmother had owned for 30 years and cried until there were no more tears left. That night, she found the envelope. It was tucked inside Rose's Bible, yellowed and worn. Maya's name was written across the front in her grandmother's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter and $300 in cash. "My dearest Maya," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then I'm dancing with your mama and papa up in heaven. Don't you cry too long, baby girl. I lived a full life, and the best part of it was raising you. I know money's tight. I know the world feels big and scary right now. But you're stronger than you think. You've got your mama's heart and your daddy's stubborn streak. Don't let anyone tell you you're not enough. Take this money and do something brave. Buy yourself a fresh start. It doesn't have to be big or fancy, just something that's yours. I love you forever and a day. Grandma Rose." Maya held the letter against her chest and sobbed. $300 and a blessing. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next week, Maya lost her job. The coffee shop where she'd worked for 2 years was closing down, and the owner apologized as he handed her a final check that barely covered rent. She applied everywhere, restaurants, retail stores, warehouses. Nobody was hiring, or at least not her. 2 months later, she was behind on rent, behind on everything. The landlord knocked on her door with sympathetic eyes and an eviction notice. "You've got 30 days, he said. "I'm sorry." Maya sat on the couch that night, staring at her laptop screen, searching for anything she could afford. Studio apartments were $1,500 a month, rooms for rent were $800. Even the sketchy places wanted more than she had. Then she saw it. An ad on an auction site, buried beneath foreclosures and storage unit sales. Estate auction, Pinewood Ridge, Colorado, stone log home, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 2 acres. Starting bid $250, no reserve, as is, cash only. Maya clicked on the listing. There were only 2 grainy photos, one of a massive stone and log structure half hidden by pine trees, the other of a front door with wrought iron hinges that looked like something out of a Gothic novel. The description was sparse, built in 1976, vacant for 12 years, needs work, serious buyers only. She read it 3 times, $250. That was all she had left after paying what she could to the landlord. It was insane. The house was 3 hours away in the mountains. She'd never even been to Pinewood Ridge. But something in her chest whispered, "Do something brave." The auction was on a Saturday morning in early October. Maya drove her grandmother's old Honda Civic up winding mountain roads, autumn leaves swirling in her wake. Pinewood Ridge was barely a town, just a post office, a general store, and a handful of houses scattered among the pines. The auction was held in the parking lot of the post office. Maybe 15 people showed up, most of them locals in flannel and work boots. The auctioneer was a tired-looking man in a suit that had seen better days. He stood on the tailgate of a pickup truck with a clipboard and a bullhorn. "All right, folks," he said. "Let's get started. First up, Lot 17, the old Mercer place up on Ridgeline Road." A few people murmured. Maya heard someone whisper, "That place. Nobody's going to bid on that." "It's a stone and log home," the auctioneer continued. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2 acres. Been vacant since 2012. Needs work, but it's solid. Starting bid is $250. Silence. The wind rustled through the pines. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. $250, the auctioneer repeated. "Do I hear $250? Maya's hand trembled as she raised it. The auctioneer's eyes found her. $250 to the young lady in the back. "Do I hear 300? Nothing. People turned to look at her. An older woman shook her head. A man in a baseball cap muttered something under his breath. $250 going once. The auctioneer paused. Going twice. He brought down his gavel. Sold for $250 to bidder 83. Maya's heart hammered in her chest. She couldn't believe it. She'd just bought a house, a whole house. After the auction, she approached the clerk to pay. The woman behind the folding table took her cash and handed her a receipt and a single brass key. "You know what you're getting into?" the woman asked. Maya blinked. "What do you mean?" "That house," the woman said quietly. "It's got a history. The man who built it, Vincent Mercer, he was strange, kept to himself. Died alone up there. Nobody's wanted to touch the place since." Maya swallowed. "Strange how?" The woman shrugged. "Just strange. Didn't talk to nobody, had everything delivered. Lived there for 36 years and never once came into town. When they found him, he'd been dead for 3 days. Maya's stomach tightened, but she forced a smile. "Well, it's mine now." The woman handed her a folder. "Here's the deed and the property information. Good luck, honey. You're gonna need it." Maya drove up Ridgeline Road that afternoon. The pavement turned to gravel, then to dirt. The trees grew denser, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the sun. After 20 minutes of climbing, she saw it. The house sat at the end of a long driveway, surrounded by towering pines and overgrown brush. It was massive, far bigger than the photos had suggested. The lower half was constructed from river stones, dark grey and moss-covered. The upper half was made of thick logs, weathered to a silver grey. The roof was steep and shingled in dark slate. 4 stone chimneys rose from different parts of the structure like sentries. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, but not the kind with happy endings. Maya parked and stepped out. The air was thin and cold, sharp with the scent of pine and earth. The silence was absolute. No birds, no wind, just the faint creak of old wood settling. She walked up to the front door. The wrought iron hinges were exactly as they'd appeared in the photo, intricate and heavy. She slid the brass key into the lock. It turned smoothly, too smoothly for a house that had been abandoned for 12 years. The door swung open with a low groan. Inside, the air was stale but dry. Dust covered every surface like a fine snow. The entryway opened into a great room with vaulted ceilings and exposed beams. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel carved with strange symbols Maya didn't recognize. The furniture was still there, a leather couch, a wooden rocking chair, a bookshelf filled with old hardcovers. She stepped further inside, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. To the left was a kitchen with butcher block counters and vintage appliances. To the right was a hallway that led deeper into the house. Everything was frozen in time, preserved like a museum. Maya explored slowly, opening doors, peering into rooms. There was a dining room with a table set for one, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, and a mirror that reflected her pale face back at her. A bedroom with a four-poster bed and heavy curtains drawn tight. And everywhere that silence. It pressed against her ears like water. She climbed the stairs to the second floor. 3 more bedrooms, another bathroom, and a hallway that stretched the length of the house. At the far end was a door, smaller than the others, almost hidden in shadow. Maya approached it cautiously. The brass knob was cold under her fingers. She turned it and pulled. A narrow staircase led upward. The attic. Her breath caught. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating wooden steps thick with dust. She climbed carefully, each step creaking under her weight. The attic was enormous. The ceiling sloped sharply on both sides, but the center was tall enough to stand. Boxes were stacked against the walls, old steamer trunks, wooden crates, furniture covered in sheets. And then she saw it. At the far end of the attic, partially hidden behind a stack of boxes, was a wall. But it was different from the others. The wood was newer, the nails less rusted. It looked like someone had built it recently, maybe in the last decade or so. Maya moved closer. She pressed her hand against the wood. It was solid, but she could hear something. A hollow space behind it. Her heart began to race. She looked around for something to pry with and found an old crowbar leaning against a trunk. She wedged it between the boards and pulled. The wood splintered easily, too easily. Someone had made this wall to be opened. Behind the false wall was a small room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. And in the center of that room sat a safe. It was massive, easily 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide. The metal was dark green, almost black, and covered in a thin layer of dust. The door was embossed with ornate scrollwork and a manufacturer's plate. Mosler Safe Company, Hamilton, Ohio. Established 1867. Maya stood frozen, her flashlight beam trembling across the safe's surface. This wasn't some cheap lockbox. This was a vault, the kind banks used in old movies. She approached it slowly, almost afraid to touch it. The dial was brass, tarnished with age. There was a small plaque beneath it, engraved with words she could barely make out in the dim light. She leaned closer. For those who dare to look beyond the surface. A chill ran down her spine. She reached out and tried the handle. Locked, of course. Maya stepped back and looked around the hidden room. There were no other boxes, no furniture, nothing but the safe. Someone had gone to great lengths to conceal this. Someone had built a false wall, sealed it up, and left it to be forgotten. Or found. She backed out of the room and descended the stairs, her mind spinning. What was in that safe? Money? Documents? Something illegal? She thought about the woman at the auction. Vincent Mercer, strange, reclusive, dead for 3 days before anyone noticed. What had he been hiding? That night, Maya slept on the leather couch in the great room, wrapped in a sleeping bag she'd brought from her car. The house creaked and groaned around her. Every sound made her jump. She kept thinking about that safe, about the hidden room, about the words engraved on the plaque. For those who dare to look beyond the surface. She barely slept. The next morning, Maya drove into town. The general store was the only place open on a Sunday. An older man stood behind the counter, reading a newspaper. "Excuse me," Maya said. "Do you know anything about Vincent Mercer?" The man looked up, his expression shifting from friendly to guarded. "Why are you asking?" "I bought his house." The man set down his newspaper. "You're the one who bought the Mercer place?" Maya nodded. He let out a low whistle. "Well, that's something. What do you want to know?" "Anything," Maya said. "Nobody will tell me anything except that he was strange." The man leaned against the counter. "Vincent Mercer moved here in 1976. Built that house himself mostly. Paid cash for everything. He was polite enough, but he didn't socialize. Didn't come to town except maybe once a month for supplies. People tried to be neighborly at first, but he made it clear he wanted to be left alone. Did he have family? Not that anyone knew. No visitors, no phone calls. After a while, people just stopped trying. What did he do for money?" The man shrugged. That's the question, isn't it? He never worked, far as anyone could tell. But he always had money. Some folks thought he was hiding from something. Others thought he was just eccentric. When did he die? 2012. Mail carrier noticed his mailbox was overflowing and called the sheriff. They found him in his bedroom. Heart attack, they said. He was 87 years old. Maya absorbed this. Did anyone go through his things? Look through the house? The county did an estate sale, sold off what they could, but most of the stuff was still there. Nobody wanted it. Maya thanked him and left. She spent the rest of the day at the tiny public library, searching for information about Vincent Mercer. There wasn't much. A few property records, a death certificate, nothing else. No criminal record, no business licenses, no social media presence. The man was a ghost, but that safe wasn't. Over the next week, Maya moved into the house fully. She cleaned the rooms, opened the windows, let fresh air chase away the staleness. She found a job waitressing at a diner 30 minutes down the mountain. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy food and gas. Every night she went up to the attic and stared at that safe. She tried the dial, tried every combination she could think of. Birthdays, anniversaries, random sequences. Nothing worked. She called a locksmith from the next town over. A man named Gary drove up on a Tuesday afternoon. He took one look at the safe and whistled. That's a Mosler. Probably from the 1920s. You don't see these anymore. Can you open it? Maya asked. Gary knelt down and examined the dial. Maybe, but it'll cost you. These old safes, they're tricky. Could take hours. Could take days. How much? 500 minimum. If I have to drill it, more. Maya's stomach sank. She didn't have $500. I'll call you when I can afford it, she said. Gary nodded and left. Maya stood alone in the attic, staring at the safe that held secrets she couldn't afford to uncover. 2 weeks passed. Maya worked double shifts at the diner, saving every dollar. She asked around town, carefully, about Vincent Mercer. Most people didn't want to talk about him, but one afternoon, an elderly woman named Ruth came into the diner and sat at Maya's station. "You're the girl who bought the Mercer place," Ruth said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." Ruth stirred her coffee slowly. "I knew Vincent, long time ago, before he shut everyone out." Maya sat down across from her. What was he like? Ruth's eyes were distant. He was brilliant, kind too in his own way. He came here after something bad happened, I don't know what, but he was running from something or hiding from something. He used to say the world wasn't safe for people like him. People like him? People who knew too much. A chill ran through Maya. What did he know? Ruth shook her head. He never said. But I'll tell you this, Vincent Mercer was rich, real rich, and he didn't want anyone to know it. Maya's pulse quickened. How do you know? Because one time, back in 1983, there was a fire in town. The school burned down. Vincent showed up the next day and wrote a check for $50,000 to rebuild it. Cash. No name on it. But I saw him do it. He made me promise never to tell. Why are you telling me now? Because he's gone. And maybe whatever he left behind, maybe it's meant for someone else now. She looked Maya in the eyes. Maybe it's meant for you. That night, Maya lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. $230 million. Could it be? Could there really be that much hidden in a safe in her attic? She thought about her grandmother, about the letter, about doing something brave. The next morning, she called Gary the locksmith. "I need you to open that safe," she said. "You got the money?" "Not yet, but I will." "Can you come next week?" Gary agreed. Maya worked every shift she could, skipped meals, scraped together $300. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. When Gary arrived, he brought a drill, a stethoscope, and a duffel bag full of tools. He worked for 3 hours, ear pressed against the safe, fingers turning the dial with surgical precision. Maya paced downstairs, unable to watch, unable to breathe. Finally, she heard it, a shout from upstairs. She sprinted up the stairs, through the hallway, up the narrow attic staircase, and into the hidden room. Gary stood there, hands on his hips, grinning. Got it. The safe door was open. Maya stepped forward, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. She peered inside. Stacks, stacks and stacks of cash, bundles wrapped in plastic, yellowed paper bound with rubber bands, and beneath the cash, envelopes, thick envelopes with official seals. She reached out with trembling hands and pulled one of the bundles free. $100 bills, all of them. She counted quickly. $10,000 in one bundle. She looked at Gary. His eyes were wide. "How much is in there?" he whispered. Maya didn't answer. She couldn't. She just stood there staring into the safe, into a fortune that shouldn't exist, into a secret that had waited 12 years to be found. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the shock and disbelief, she felt something else rising. Fear. What happens next will turn this discovery upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the biggest treasures come with the heaviest costs. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Gary cleared his throat. "Miss, I don't know what you've got here, but I think you need to call someone. Police, maybe. A lawyer." Maya shook her head, still unable to look away from the safe. "Not yet. Let me figure this out first. I can't just leave you here with—" "Please," Maya interrupted, "just give me some time." Gary hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll send you a bill for the 300. The rest, we'll call it, even if you don't mention my name to anyone. Deal?" "Deal." After Gary left, Maya sat on the attic floor in front of the open safe. She pulled out bundle after bundle, stacking them carefully. When she finished counting the cash, her hands were shaking so badly she had to stop and breathe. $47 million. In cash. She opened the envelopes next. Inside were bearer bonds, the kind that belonged to whoever held them. No names, no records, just paper worth a fortune. The dates ranged from 1970 to 1995. She counted those too. $183 million in bonds. Maya sat back against the wall, her vision swimming. $230 million. In her attic, in a house she bought for $250. She laughed. Not from joy, but from shock, from disbelief. The sound echoed in the small room and died quickly. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory. "Do something brave." But this wasn't brave. This was impossible. This was dangerous. She thought about Vincent Mercer, about a man who lived alone for 36 years, who never let anyone close, who died with a fortune hidden in his walls. What had he done to get this money? Where had it come from? And why hadn't he spent it? The engraved words on the safe's plaque haunted her. For those who dare to look beyond the surface. Maya gathered a few bundles of cash and went downstairs. She sat at the dining room table and spread them out. The bills were old, some from the 1980s, some from the 90s. The serial numbers were non-sequential. They didn't look fake, but she wasn't an expert. She opened her laptop and started researching. Bearer bonds, cash hoarding, estate law, unclaimed wealth. The more she read, the more her stomach tightened. If this money was legitimate, it should have been reported. Estate taxes should have been paid. The county should have known. But nobody had found the safe. Vincent had hidden it too well. And if the money wasn't legitimate, if Vincent had stolen it or earned it through illegal means, then Maya was now in possession of evidence. Or worse, she was in possession of money that belonged to people who would do anything to get it back. She closed the laptop and stared at the wall. The smart thing would be to call the authorities, to report the find, to let them sort it out. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the memory of eviction notices and empty bank accounts. Maybe it was the way her grandmother had told her to do something brave, or maybe it was just the primal human instinct that whispered, this could change everything. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay on the couch, staring at the shadows cast by moonlight through the windows. Every creak made her jump. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. She thought about Ruth's words. Vincent Mercer was rich, real rich, and he didn't want anyone to know it. Why? What had he been afraid of? Around 3 a.m, Maya gave up on sleep. She went back upstairs to the attic, to the hidden room. She studied the safe more carefully this time, looking for clues she might have missed. That's when she saw it. A small piece of paper tucked into a gap between the safe and the floor. She pulled it out carefully. It was a note, written in shaky handwriting. The ink was faded, but she could still make out the words. "If you found this, then I am gone. This money is not stolen. It is earned, saved, and hidden from those who would take it unjustly. I could not spend it without drawing attention. I could not give it away without raising questions. So I leave it here, a treasure for the brave or the desperate. Use it wisely. Use it well. Do what I could not." The note was unsigned, but Maya knew it was from Vincent. She sat on the floor, the note clutched in her hand, and cried. Not from fear this time, but from something else. Relief, maybe, or hope. Vincent Mercer had left her a gift, a chance, a way out. But as she sat there in the darkness of that hidden room, surrounded by more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes, Maya Sullivan realized something else. This wasn't just a gift. It was a test. And the real question wasn't how she'd found it. The question was what she would do with it now. Because $230 million doesn't just change your life, it changes who you are. And in a world where money talks louder than truth, where greed runs deeper than kindness, Maya was about to learn that some fortunes come with a price far greater than their worth. She folded the note carefully and placed it in her pocket. Then she closed the safe, rebuilt the false wall as best she could, and went downstairs. Tomorrow she would figure out what to do. Tomorrow she would decide who to trust. Tomorrow she would begin the journey that would either save her or destroy her. But tonight, in a stone log house in the mountains of Colorado, a 23-year-old girl who'd bought a ghost for $250 sat alone with a secret that could change the world. And she had no idea that by sunrise, everything would begin to unravel. Maya woke to sunlight streaming through the windows of the great room, her neck stiff from sleeping on the leather couch. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The safe, the money, $230 million hidden in her attic. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. Had it been real? Or had exhaustion and stress conjured some impossible dream? She climbed the stairs, walked down the hallway, up the narrow attic staircase, and pushed aside the boxes she'd stacked in front of the false wall. Her hands trembled as she pulled back the boards. The safe was still there, still open, still filled with more money than she'd ever imagined. It was real. Maya grabbed one bundle of cash and brought it downstairs to the kitchen. She made coffee in Vincent's old percolator and sat at the butcher block counter, turning the bundle over in her hands. The bills were crisp despite their age, the ink still bold. She held one up to the light, looking for watermarks, security threads, anything that might indicate they were counterfeit. Everything looked legitimate. She opened her laptop and began searching. Vincent Mercer. She'd searched before, but this time she dug deeper. Public records, property transfers, business registrations, court documents. Hours passed. The coffee grew cold. And slowly a picture began to emerge. Vincent Mercer hadn't always been a recluse. In 1968, he'd been a stockbroker in New York City, working for a firm called Whitmore and Associates. He'd been successful, very successful. Articles from old financial magazines mentioned him as a rising star, a man with an uncanny ability to predict market movements. Then, in 1973, everything changed. Maya found a brief mention in a New York Times article from October of that year. Whitmore and Associates had been investigated for insider trading. Several executives had been arrested. Vincent Mercer's name appeared in the article, but only once. He'd been questioned but never charged. The firm collapsed. Millions of dollars vanished. Investors lost everything. And Vincent Mercer disappeared. 3 years later, he resurfaced in Pinewood Ridge, Colorado, where he bought 2 acres of land and built a fortress of stone and logs. Maya leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Vincent hadn't been hiding from nothing. He'd been hiding from something very specific. But had he stolen the money? Or had he simply known too much about people who had? She kept digging. She found property tax records showing Vincent had paid in full, in cash, every year for 36 years. She found receipts for building materials, all paid in cash. She found a single bank account opened in 1976 with a balance that never exceeded $5,000. Everything else, every other financial footprint, was invisible. The man had lived off the grid financially, spending only what was necessary to avoid suspicion, keeping the vast majority of his wealth hidden. Maya printed out everything she found and spread it across the dining room table. Articles, records, timelines. She drew connections with a pen, trying to piece together the puzzle. Vincent had worked for a corrupt firm. The firm collapsed amid scandal. Vincent walked away clean, but disappeared immediately after. And 36 years later, he died with $230 million hidden in his attic. The question was simple. Had Vincent stolen that money from Whitmore and Associates? Or had he been protecting it from people who would have stolen it from him? The note he'd left suggested the latter. This money is not stolen. It is earned, saved, and hidden from those who would take it unjustly. But would a thief say anything different? Maya closed her laptop and rubbed her eyes. She needed to talk to someone who'd known Vincent, someone who might remember details from those early years. She drove into town that afternoon. The general store was busy for a Wednesday, locals buying supplies before the weekend. Maya waited until the crowd thinned, then approached the counter where the owner, Tom, was restocking cigarettes. "Tom," Maya said, "do you remember when Vincent Mercer first moved here, back in '76? Tom looked up, his expression cautious. "I was just a kid then. Why?" "I'm trying to understand him, trying to understand why he lived the way he did." Tom set down the cigarette cartons. "You talked to Ruth already, didn't you?" "Yes. Then you know as much as anyone." Vincent kept to himself. "But my dad, he helped Vincent build that house, spent 6 months working up there." Maya's pulse quickened. "Is your dad still around?" Tom shook his head. "Passed in 2009. But he used to tell stories about Vincent, said the man was paranoid, had him build walls thicker than any house needed, wanted locks on every door, bars on every window. My dad thought he was crazy." "Did your dad ever say what Vincent was afraid of?" Tom leaned against the counter, thinking. "He said Vincent used to check over his shoulder constantly, like he expected someone to show up. My dad asked him once if he was in trouble with the law. Vincent said no, but not everyone who breaks you follows the rules." A chill ran through Maya. Not everyone who breaks you follows the rules. "Did Vincent ever mention New York, or a company called Whitmore and Associates?" Tom's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about Whitmore?" Maya hesitated. "I found some old papers in the house, documents." Tom looked around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. "My dad told me something once, made me promise never to repeat it. But I guess it doesn't matter now." "What?" "Vincent told my dad he'd witnessed something in New York, something involving powerful people. He said he had proof, evidence that could destroy careers and send people to prison. But he also said if he ever tried to use that evidence, he'd be dead within a week." Maya's mouth went dry. "What kind of evidence?" Tom shrugged. "My dad didn't know, but Vincent said he was holding on to it like an insurance policy. As long as he stayed quiet and stayed hidden, he'd stay alive. Did anyone ever come looking for him? Not that I know of. But Vincent lived like they might, every single day." Maya thanked Tom and left. She sat in her car for a long time, staring at the mountains. Vincent hadn't just been hiding money, he'd been hiding evidence, and that money, all $230 million of it, might be tied to something far more dangerous than she'd realized. That evening, Maya returned to the house and searched it more thoroughly. She went through every room, every closet, every drawer. She was looking for the evidence Vincent had mentioned, the proof he'd kept as insurance. In the master bedroom, she found a filing cabinet she'd overlooked before. It was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom of the desk drawer. Inside were manila folders, dozens of them, all labeled with dates and codes she didn't understand. She pulled one out. It was filled with photocopied documents. Stock transactions, wire transfers, meeting notes, all from Whitmore and Associates, all from 1970 to 1973. She opened another folder. Bank statements showing money being moved through offshore accounts, millions of dollars. Names she recognized from her earlier research, executives from Whitmore, politicians, even a federal judge. Vincent hadn't just worked for a corrupt firm. He'd documented everything. Every illegal trade, every bribe, every payoff. And he'd kept it all. Maya sat on the floor, surrounded by papers that could destroy reputations, end careers, and send people to prison. People who were likely still alive. People who would do anything to keep this buried. Her hands shook as she realized the truth. The money in the safe wasn't Vincent's fortune, it was his leverage. He couldn't spend it because spending large amounts would draw attention. He couldn't deposit it because that would create records. And he couldn't destroy it because if his enemies ever came for him, he needed to be able to prove where it came from. The money was evidence, and now it was hers. Maya gathered the folders and brought them downstairs. She laid them out on the dining room table next to her research. The picture was complete now. In 1973, Whitmore and Associates had collapsed, but the money hadn't disappeared. Vincent had taken it, not to steal it, but to keep it from vanishing into offshore accounts and Swiss banks. He'd preserved it as proof, and for 36 years he'd lived in fear that someone would come to take it back. The question now was whether anyone still cared. It had been over 40 years. The people involved would be in their 70s or 80s if they were still alive. Maybe Vincent's secret had died with him, or maybe not. Maya spent the next 3 days reading through every document in Vincent's files. She made notes, drew timelines, connected names to companies, to banks, to politicians. The web of corruption was staggering. Whitmore and Associates had been just one small piece of a much larger operation, and Vincent had proof of all of it. On the 4th day, Maya drove back into town. She needed to talk to Ruth again, the elderly woman who'd known Vincent before he shut everyone out. Ruth lived in a small cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by flower gardens that had gone wild with late autumn blooms. Maya knocked, and Ruth answered with a knowing smile. "I wondered when you'd come back," she said. They sat in Ruth's kitchen, drinking tea from delicate china cups. Ruth's hands trembled slightly as she poured, but her eyes were sharp. "You found something," Ruth said. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded. "I found money. A lot of money. And documents. Papers that prove people did terrible things." Ruth set down her teacup. "How much money?" $230 million. Ruth's eyes widened, but she didn't seem entirely surprised. She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke softly. "Vincent once told me that the only thing more dangerous than having nothing is having everything, because when you have nothing, people ignore you. But when you have everything, people hunt you." "Did he ever tell you where the money came from?" Ruth shook her head. "But I knew it wasn't clean. Not because Vincent was dirty, but because the world he came from was. He used to say that sometimes the only way to survive evil is to become its keeper." "What does that mean?" Ruth smiled sadly. "It means Vincent held onto evidence that evil men wanted destroyed. And as long as he had it, they couldn't touch him without exposing themselves." "Do you think they're still out there, the people he had evidence against?" Ruth's expression darkened. "Power doesn't die easily, child. It changes hands, passes down, hides behind new faces, but it doesn't disappear." A chill ran through Maya. "So they might still be looking. If they know you have what Vincent had, yes, but how would they know?" Ruth leaned forward. "Because secrets like that don't stay buried forever. You've been asking questions. You've been digging. Someone, somewhere is paying attention. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more." Maya drove home as the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the road. Ruth's words echoed in her mind. Someone, somewhere is paying attention. When she reached the house, something felt wrong. The front door was slightly ajar. She knew she'd locked it. She always locked it now. Maya's heart began to pound. She reached into her glove box and pulled out the tire iron she'd started keeping there. Slowly, quietly, she approached the house. The door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, everything looked normal. Nothing appeared disturbed, but the air felt different. Someone had been here. She moved through the great room, weapon raised, checking corners and shadows. The kitchen was empty, the hallway clear. She climbed the stairs, every sense on high alert. The bedrooms were untouched, but when she reached the attic stairs, she saw it. Fresh footprints in the dust, not hers, larger, heavier. Someone had been in the attic. Maya's breath came fast and shallow. She climbed the narrow staircase, flashlight in one hand, tire iron in the other. The hidden room was exactly as she'd left it. The safe was closed, the false wall in place. But the boxes around it had been moved, just slightly, just enough. Someone had found the safe. Someone knew. Maya backed out of the attic and ran downstairs. She grabbed her laptop and Vincent's files and threw them in her car. She couldn't stay here, not tonight, not until she knew who'd been inside. She drove to a motel 30 miles down the mountain. It was cheap and anonymous, the kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions. She checked in under a false name and locked herself in a room that smelled like cigarette smoke and desperation. That night, lying on a lumpy mattress with the television murmuring in the background, Maya tried to make sense of everything. Someone had been in her house. Someone who knew about the safe, or at least suspected something was there, but who? And how had they known? She thought about the locksmith, Gary. He'd seen the money. He'd promised not to tell anyone, but promises broke easily when enough money was involved. Or maybe it was someone from town. She'd been asking questions about Vincent. Maybe she'd asked the wrong person. Or maybe, and this thought terrified her most, someone had been watching Vincent's house for years, waiting to see if anyone would finally find what he'd hidden. Maya opened her laptop and searched for security camera systems. She needed to know if someone came back. She needed proof. But even as she made plans, a deeper question gnawed at her. Was the money worth this? Worth the fear, the paranoia, the constant looking over her shoulder? Vincent had lived like this for 36 years. Was that the price of keeping a secret this big? She thought about her grandmother's letter. Do something brave. But what was brave about living in fear? The next morning, Maya drove back to Pinewood Ridge. She stopped at the hardware store and bought motion sensor lights, door alarms, and a security camera system. The owner, a friendly man in his 50s, helped her load everything into her car. You planning on fortifying something? He asked with a smile. Just want to feel safer, Maya said. Smart, especially up on Ridgeline Road. That's pretty isolated. Maya froze. How do you know where I live? The man's smile faltered. Small town, miss. Everyone knows who bought the Mercer place. Maya forced a smile and left quickly. Everyone knows. The words followed her like a shadow. She spent the rest of the day installing the security equipment. Cameras at every entrance, motion sensors on the doors, alarms on the windows. She worked until her hands were raw and the sun had set behind the mountains. That night, she sat in the great room with all the lights off, watching the security monitors on her laptop. Every rustle of wind, every creak of the house made her jump. Around midnight, one of the cameras caught movement. A figure walking up the driveway, staying in the shadows. Maya's heart hammered in her chest. She watched as the figure approached the house, then stopped at the edge of the camera's range. For a long moment, the figure just stood there. Then it turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. Maya sat frozen, her breath coming in short gasps. Someone was watching. Someone knew. The next morning, she drove into town and went straight to the sheriff's office. The sheriff was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her name was Sarah Holt. What can I do for you? Sheriff Holt asked. Maya sat down, trying to keep her voice steady. Someone broke into my house, and last night someone was on my property. Did you see who it was? No, but I have it on camera. Maya showed the sheriff the footage on her phone. The sheriff watched it twice, her expression unreadable. That could be anyone, she finally said. A hiker, someone who got lost, kids messing around. At midnight? On private property? Sheriff Holt leaned back in her chair. Miss Sullivan, I'll be honest with you. You bought the Mercer place. People are curious. That house has been empty for 12 years. Now someone's living there. Folks are going to drive by, take a look, maybe even walk around. This wasn't curiosity, Maya said firmly. Someone came inside my house while I was gone. They went through my things. Was anything stolen? Maya hesitated. She couldn't tell the sheriff about the safe, about the money. Not yet. Not without knowing who she could trust. No, she finally said. Nothing was taken. But I know someone was there. Sheriff Holt's expression softened slightly. I understand you're scared. Living alone in that big house, it's got to be unsettling. But unless something is actually stolen or you're threatened directly, there's not much I can do. I can increase patrols up Ridgeline Road, check on the property more often. That would help, Maya said, though she knew it wouldn't be enough. As she stood to leave, the sheriff spoke again. Miss Sullivan, can I give you some advice? Maya turned back. Whatever you found in that house, whatever Vincent Mercer left behind, be careful with it. Vincent lived the way he did for a reason. Sometimes the past is better left buried. Maya's blood ran cold. How do you know I found something? The sheriff's expression didn't change. Because people don't install $10,000 worth of security equipment unless they're protecting something valuable. And people don't act as paranoid as you're acting unless they have something to hide. I'm not hiding anything, Maya said quietly. Sheriff Holt stood and walked Maya to the door. Then you've got nothing to worry about. But if that changes, if you do find something, you come to me first, before anyone else. Understood? Maya nodded and left. She sat in her car outside the sheriff's office, her hands gripping the steering wheel. The sheriff knew, or at least suspected. And if the sheriff knew, who else did? That afternoon, Maya went to the library. The librarian, a young woman named Emily, greeted her warmly. Back again? Emily asked. I'm researching the history of the area, Maya said, which was partly true. Do you have any old newspapers from the 70s and 80s? Emily led her to a back room where decades of newspapers were stored on microfilm. We're not digitized yet, Emily apologized. Budget cuts. This is perfect, Maya said. She spent hours scrolling through old newspapers, looking for any mention of Vincent Mercer or Whitmore and Associates. She found a few articles about the firm's collapse, but nothing new. Then, in a newspaper from August 1976, she found something different. It was a brief mention in the local news section. New resident Vincent Mercer has purchased property on Ridgeline Road. Mr. Mercer comes to us from New York City and plans to build a home in our beautiful mountains. We welcome him to Pinewood Ridge, but beneath that paragraph was another brief mention that Maya almost missed. The Whitmore and Associates scandal continues to unfold as federal investigators uncover evidence of widespread fraud. 3 executives have been arrested, but sources say more indictments are coming. One former employee, who spoke on condition of anonymity, stated that the firm's illegal activities went far beyond what has been publicly disclosed. Maya's heart raced. The timing was perfect. Vincent had moved to Pinewood Ridge just as investigators were closing in. He'd gotten out before the walls came down. But the article mentioned evidence. Investigators had found proof. So why had Vincent kept his own stash of documents? Unless the investigators hadn't found everything. Unless Vincent had taken the most damaging evidence with him. Maya printed the articles and returned home. She spread everything out on the dining room table once more. The timeline was clear. Vincent had worked for Whitmore and Associates. When the firm collapsed, he'd taken evidence and money. He'd hidden for 36 years, and then he'd died, leaving everything behind. But the question remained. Who else knew? Who had broken into her house? And what did they want? That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound. The house creaked and groaned around her. Outside, the wind moved through the pines like whispered warnings. Around 3 a.m, her security system chimed. Motion detected, front driveway. Maya grabbed her laptop and pulled up the camera feed. A car was parked at the end of the driveway, headlights off. A figure stepped out and walked toward the house. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She grabbed her phone, ready to call the sheriff. But then the figure stepped into the light of her motion sensor. It was Gary, the locksmith. He knocked on the door. "Miss Sullivan, it's Gary. I need to talk to you. It's important." Maya didn't move. Why would he come at 3 in the morning? "Please," Gary called through the door. "I know you're in there. I can see the lights. I need to warn you about something." Maya approached the door slowly, staying out of sight. "Warn me about what?" There was a pause. Then Gary's voice, lower and more urgent. "People know. About the safe. About what's inside. You need to get out of here tonight." "Who knows?" Maya demanded. "Did you tell someone?" "No, I swear I didn't, but someone else figured it out. And they're coming. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but they're coming." Maya's hand trembled on the doorknob. "Who's coming, Gary?" Before he could answer, headlights swept across the driveway. Another car was approaching. Gary's head snapped around. "Oh, God," he whispered. "They're here!" He turned back to the door, his voice desperate. "Miss Sullivan, run, right now. Go out the back and run." Maya's security camera showed the second car pulling up behind Gary's. 3 men stepped out. They moved with military precision, fanning out around the property. Gary backed away from the door, hands raised. The men approached him. One of them spoke, too quietly for the camera to pick up. Gary shook his head. The man spoke again, more forcefully. Then one of the men looked directly at Maya's camera. He smiled, raised his hand, and waved. Maya stumbled backward, her heart exploding in her chest. They knew she was watching. They wanted her to know they were there. She grabbed her keys, her phone, and ran to the back door. But before she could open it, a voice stopped her cold. It came from the front of the house, amplified through some kind of megaphone or speaker. "Miss Sullivan, we know you're inside. We're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk. We want to make you an offer you'll find very generous." Maya pressed herself against the wall, her mind racing. An offer. They wanted the money, or the documents, or both. "We know what Vincent left behind," the voice continued, "and we know you found it. What you're holding on to belongs to people who've been looking for it for a very long time, people who are willing to pay you for its safe return." Maya didn't respond. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for another way out. $10 million, the voice said. Cash, tax-free. All you have to do is turn over what's in that safe and forget you ever saw it. You walk away rich, we walk away happy, everyone wins. $10 million. Maya's mind reeled. It was more money than she'd ever dreamed of, more than enough to change her life forever, but it was also less than 5% of what was actually in the safe, and if they were offering $10 million, it meant what she had was worth far more to them. "Miss Sullivan," the voice said, now with an edge of impatience, "we're being very reasonable, but our patience has limits. Open the door. Let's talk like civilized people." Maya looked at the security monitor. Gary was on his knees now, hands behind his head. One of the men stood over him with something in his hand, a gun. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to take. Maya made a decision. She couldn't run. The back door would be covered by now. She couldn't call the sheriff. They'd be gone before anyone arrived. Her only option was to fight back. But not with weapons. With information. She grabbed her phone and opened the camera app. She started recording. Then she opened a window just wide enough to shout through. "I don't know who you are," she called out, "but I know what Vincent Mercer had on you. I know about Whitmore and Associates. I know about the offshore accounts, the bribes, the fraud, and I've already copied everything. If anything happens to me, it all goes to the press, to the FBI, to everyone." There was silence. Then the voice came back, colder now. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Vincent spent 36 years protecting this evidence. You think I'd be stupid enough not to back it up?" Another silence. Longer this time. Then she heard the men talking among themselves, too quietly to make out words. Finally, the voice came back one more time. "This isn't over, Miss Sullivan. You just made a very dangerous enemy." The headlights flared. The cars backed out of the driveway. Within minutes, they were gone. Gary remained on his knees for a long moment, then slowly stood and walked to his car. Before he got in, he looked at the house and mouthed two words Maya could just barely read on the security monitor. "I'm sorry." Then he was gone too. Maya collapsed against the wall, her phone still recording, her whole body shaking. She'd survived, for now, but everything had changed. They knew who she was, they knew what she had, and they'd be back. She looked around the house, at the stone walls Vincent had built to protect himself, at the locks and alarms and cameras. She'd thought they would keep her safe. But Vincent had lived like this for 36 years, and he'd still died alone, his secrets buried, his fortune hidden, his life consumed by fear. Maya Sullivan sat in the darkness of that stone log home, surrounded by $230 million she couldn't spend, and evidence she couldn't use without risking her life, and she finally understood the weight of what she'd inherited. This wasn't a treasure, it was a curse, and she'd just begun to pay its price. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat at the dining room table with her laptop, uploading every document from Vincent's files to 3 different cloud storage accounts. She made copies of the bearer bonds using her scanner. She photographed every bundle of cash. If they came back, if they took everything, at least she'd have proof it existed. By dawn, her eyes burned and her hands cramped, but everything was backed up. She encrypted the files with passwords only she knew and sent the login information to 3 different email accounts she'd created just for this purpose. Then she sat back and tried to think clearly. Those men had offered her $10 million. They'd threatened her. They'd held Gary at gunpoint. These weren't just corporate lawyers trying to recover lost assets. These were people who operated outside the law. And they knew where she lived. Maya packed a bag with clothes, toiletries, and her laptop. She grabbed the most important documents from Vincent's files and put them in a waterproof envelope. Then she loaded everything into her car. She wasn't leaving permanently, not yet. But she needed to be ready to run at a moment's notice. As the sun rose over the mountains, Maya drove back into town. She needed help, real help. And there was only one person she could think of who might understand what she was dealing with. Ruth answered the door in a bathrobe, her white hair uncombed. "Maya, child, it's 6 a.m. What's wrong?" "Everything," Maya said, her voice breaking. "Can I come in?" They sat in Ruth's kitchen again, but this time Maya told her everything. The safe, the money, the documents, the men who'd come in the night. Ruth listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. When Maya finished, Ruth was quiet for a long time. Then she stood and walked to a cabinet. She pulled out a shoebox and brought it back to the table. "I need to show you something," Ruth said. "Something Vincent gave me years ago. He made me promise to keep it safe, to never open it unless something happened to him." "What is it?" Ruth opened the box. Inside was a sealed envelope and a small leather journal. She handed both to Maya. "The envelope's for you." The journal, that was Vincent's. He kept it hidden from everyone. But before he got too sick, before his mind started to fade, he gave it to me. He said someday someone would come looking for answers. He said I'd know when it was time. Maya's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in the same shaky handwriting as the note she'd found in the safe. "To whoever finds this," it began. "My name is Vincent Edward Mercer. I am writing this in the spring of 2011, knowing my time is running short. If you're reading this, you've found what I spent my life protecting. Now you need to know why. In 1973, I worked as a senior analyst at Whitmore & Associates. We were supposed to be helping investors build wealth. Instead, we were stealing from them. Insider trading, pump and dump schemes, offshore money laundering. I didn't know at first. By the time I figured it out, I was already complicit. The firm was connected to people far more powerful than simple stockbrokers. Politicians who needed campaign money, organized crime figures who needed to clean dirty cash. Even intelligence operatives who used our accounts to fund Operations Congress would never approve. When federal investigators started closing in, the partners at Whitmore decided to destroy all evidence and disappear the money. They would let lower-level employees take the fall while they walked away rich and protected. I couldn't let that happen. Not to the investors who'd lost everything, not to the truth. So I took copies of everything, every transaction, every account, every name. And I took the money, all of it, $230 million that was being moved to offshore accounts where it would vanish forever. I preserved it as evidence, proof that couldn't be destroyed or denied. Then I ran. I knew they'd come for me eventually. The people I had evidence against, they had resources, connections, patience. So I hid. I built a fortress. I lived like a prisoner in my own home for 36 years, waiting for them to find me. But they never did. Maybe they assumed I'd spend the money and they could track me that way. Maybe they thought I'd try to blackmail them. They didn't understand that I wasn't interested in wealth or revenge. I just wanted to preserve the truth. Now that truth is yours. The money is evidence of crimes that powerful people committed. The documents prove who those people are. Together, they could bring down corrupt officials, expose criminal networks, and return what was stolen to those who lost it. Or they could destroy you, just as surely as they would have destroyed me. I don't know what the right choice is anymore. I thought I did once. But 36 years alone gives you time to doubt everything. All I can tell you is this. Whatever you decide, be sure. Because once you step into the light with what I've given you, there's no going back. Vincent Edward Mercer. Maya read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Vincent hadn't been a thief. He'd been a whistleblower, a man who'd sacrificed everything to protect evidence that powerful people wanted buried. And now that burden was hers. She opened the journal. The entries spanned decades, from 1976 to 2011. Vincent had documented everything. His fears, his regrets, the people he suspected were looking for him, the close calls when strangers showed up in town asking questions. One entry from January 1997 caught Maya's attention. A man came to the general store today. He was asking about me, about the house, about whether I ever have visitors. Tom's father called to warn me. I spent 3 days in the hidden room I built beneath the basement, waiting to see if he'd come. He never did. But I know they're still out there, still searching, still waiting for me to make a mistake. Another entry from June 2005. I saw a black car parked at the end of my driveway this morning. It sat there for 20 minutes, then drove away. My heart hasn't stopped racing. I'm 79 years old and I'm still afraid. Will it ever end? The final entry was dated March 2011, just over a year before Vincent died. I'm dying. The doctor confirmed it today. Cancer, too advanced to treat. 6 months, maybe a year. I always thought they'd find me before death did. But it seems I'll die with my secret intact. I don't know if that's a victory or a tragedy. I've hidden the evidence so well that it may never be found. Or maybe someone brave will stumble upon it and do what I couldn't. I pray they're stronger than I was. I pray they have the courage to shine light into the darkness, because the world needs to know what happened. The victims deserve justice, and the guilty deserve to be held accountable, even if it's 40 years too late. Maya closed the journal, her vision blurred with tears. Vincent had been a good man trapped in an impossible situation, and he'd died hoping someone would finish what he'd started. Ruth reached across the table and took Maya's hand. "What are you going to do, child?" "I don't know," Maya whispered. "If I go public with this, those men will come back. They'll destroy me, maybe even kill me. But if I don't, if I just take their money and walk away, then Vincent died for nothing. All those people who lost everything, they'll never get justice." Ruth squeezed her hand. "Justice is a heavy burden to carry alone, I know." Maya wiped her eyes. "That's why I need to find people I can trust, people who can help me do this the right way. The question is, who?" Over the next 3 days, Maya barely left Ruth's house. She made phone calls, sent encrypted emails, and researched everyone she could think of who might be able to help. She needed lawyers, but not just any lawyers. She needed people who specialized in whistleblower cases, who'd gone up against powerful institutions before and won. She found a firm in Denver called Morrison & Associates. Their website showed they'd handled cases against pharmaceutical companies, defense contractors, even government agencies. She called and left a message, explaining she had evidence of financial crimes but needed confidentiality. They called back within 2 hours. The next morning, Maya drove to Denver. The law offices were in a sleek high-rise downtown, all glass and chrome. She felt out of place in her thrift store clothes and worn sneakers. A receptionist led her to a conference room where 2 lawyers waited. The first was a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair and sharp eyes. She introduced herself as Catherine Morrison, the firm's founder. The second was a younger man, maybe 35, with the kind of intensity that suggested he didn't sleep much. His name was David Chen. "Thank you for seeing me," Maya said, sitting down. Catherine smiled. "Your message was intriguing. You said you have evidence of financial crimes committed by powerful people. Can you be more specific?" Maya took a deep breath and told them everything. The house, the safe, the money, the documents, Vincent's story. She showed them copies of the files she'd brought. She explained about the men who'd come to her house, about the threats, about the $10 million offer. When she finished, both lawyers sat in stunned silence. Finally, David spoke. "This is one of the most significant whistleblower cases I've ever seen. If what you're saying is true, and these documents are authentic, we're talking about evidence that could trigger federal investigations, criminal prosecutions, civil lawsuits. This could go on for years." "Is it worth it?" Maya asked. "Can we actually win?" Catherine leaned forward. "Miss Sullivan, cases like this are never easy. The people you're up against, they have resources we can only imagine. They'll fight dirty. They'll try to discredit you, intimidate you, maybe even harm you. But yes, we can win. If the evidence is solid, if you're willing to see this through, we can win. What do I have to do?" "First," Catherine said, "we need to secure everything. All the documents, all the money, all the bearer bonds. We need to put them in a place where they can't be stolen or destroyed. Then we need to notify the proper authorities, the SEC, the FBI, maybe even the Department of Justice." "And the money?" Maya asked. "What happens to that?" David answered. "If the money was stolen from investors, it'll be returned to them or their estates. If it can't be returned, it becomes part of the evidence in criminal cases. You won't be able to keep it." Maya nodded. "I know. I don't want it. I just want to make sure Vincent's sacrifice meant something." Catherine smiled. "Then we'll make sure it does." They spent the next 6 hours going through every document Maya had brought. Catherine and David made notes, asked questions, built a timeline. By the time they finished, it was dark outside. "This is going to be dangerous," Catherine said as Maya prepared to leave. "The people behind this, they've already shown they're willing to use violence. You need protection." "I can't afford bodyguards," Maya said. "We'll work something out." David stood. "For now, you need to move to a secure location. Don't go back to that house alone. Where should I go?" Catherine handed her a business card with an address. "This is a safe house we use for clients in high-risk cases. It's secure, monitored, and anonymous. Stay there until we can arrange something more permanent." Maya took the card, feeling both relieved and terrified. This was really happening. She was really doing this. But 2 days later, everything changed. Maya was staying at the safe house, a modest apartment in a nondescript building in suburban Denver, when Catherine called. "We have a problem," Catherine said, her voice tight. "Someone leaked information about your case to the press." "What? How?" "We don't know. But there's an article going up tonight on a financial news website. It mentions Vincent Mercer, Whitmore and Associates, and a $230 million discovery. It doesn't name you specifically, but it won't take long for people to figure out who found it." Maya's heart sank. "What does this mean?" "It means we're losing control of the narrative. It means every opportunist, every lawyer, every treasure hunter in the country is going to come looking for that money. And it means the people you're trying to expose, they're going to accelerate their plans. What do we do?" Catherine paused. "We go public on our terms. Tomorrow morning, we hold a press conference. We announce that you've discovered evidence of massive financial fraud and that you're cooperating with federal authorities. We get ahead of this before they can spin it their way. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She sat in the safe house watching news websites refresh every few minutes. At 11:47, the article went live. The headline read, "Hidden Fortune Discovered in Colorado Mansion Linked to 1970s Financial Scandal." The article detailed everything: Vincent Mercer's connection to Whitmore and Associates, the firm's collapse, the missing money that was never recovered. And now, 40 years later, a new owner had allegedly found it hidden in the walls. The comment section exploded within minutes. People calling it a hoax, others demanding the money be returned to victims. Some claiming they'd lost everything to Whitmore and Associates and deserved compensation. And buried in the comments, one that made Maya's blood run cold. She won't live long enough to spend it. The press conference was held the next morning at Catherine's law office. Reporters packed the conference room, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Maya sat between Catherine and David, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Catherine spoke first. "Good morning. My name is Catherine Morrison, and I represent Maya Sullivan. Miss Sullivan recently purchased a home in Pinewood Ridge, Colorado, where she discovered evidence of financial crimes committed in the 1970s. This evidence includes documents and assets totaling approximately $230 million. Miss Sullivan is cooperating fully with federal authorities and will be turning over all evidence to the appropriate agencies." A dozen hands shot up. Catherine pointed to a reporter in the front row. "Is Miss Sullivan claiming ownership of the money?" "No," Catherine said firmly. "Miss Sullivan makes no claim to the assets. She believes they belong to the victims of the fraud and should be returned to them or their families." Another reporter. "Why did she wait so long to come forward?" "She discovered the evidence less than 2 weeks ago," David interjected. "She's been working with us to ensure everything is handled properly and legally." A reporter from a tabloid website. "Is it true someone threatened her life?" "We're not commenting on security matters," Catherine said. But the damage was done. The question hung in the air. Now everyone knew Maya was in danger. After the press conference, Maya was escorted out through a back entrance and into a waiting car with tinted windows. 2 security guards Catherine had hired sat in the front seat. They drove her back to the safe house, checking constantly to make sure they weren't followed. For the next 3 days, Maya's life became a blur of meetings, interviews, and legal preparations. FBI agents came to take her statement. SEC investigators reviewed the documents. David and Catherine coordinated with federal prosecutors who were considering criminal charges against people named in Vincent's files. But as the investigation progressed, complications emerged. Many of the people Vincent had evidence against were dead. Others were too old or too sick to prosecute. And some, the most dangerous ones, were still very much alive and very powerful. One name kept appearing in the documents: Senator Richard Whitmore. He was the son of one of the founders of Whitmore and Associates. Now in his 70s, he sat on powerful Senate committees and had connections throughout the government. When prosecutors approached him with questions, he immediately hired a team of lawyers who filed motions to block the investigation. They claimed the evidence was too old to be reliable. They questioned its authenticity. They argued that even if crimes had been committed, the statute of limitations had long since expired. And behind the scenes, they started coming after Maya. It started with letters, legal threats claiming Maya had stolen property, demands that she return the money immediately or face civil lawsuits. Then came private investigators, digging into her background, her finances, her grandmother's death, looking for anything they could use against her. One morning, Maya woke to find her face on the front page of a tabloid website. The headline screamed, "Greedy millennial refuses to return stolen fortune." The article painted her as an opportunist who'd stumbled onto money and was using legal technicalities to keep it. It mentioned her eviction from her Denver apartment, her job losses, her financial struggles. It suggested she'd been looking for a way to get rich quick and had found it. The comments were vicious. People called her a thief, a liar, worse. They said she should be arrested. They said Vincent's money should go to the government or to charity, not to some nobody from Colorado. Maya sat in the safe house reading the comments until David took the laptop away from her. "Don't read that garbage," he said. It's a smear campaign. They're trying to turn public opinion against you so prosecutors lose interest in the case. It's working, Maya said, her voice hollow. People hate me. They think I'm trying to steal money that doesn't belong to me. People who don't know the truth, Catherine said, entering the room. But we'll make sure the truth comes out. We're filing motions to unseal documents that prove you're not claiming ownership. We're releasing statements about your cooperation with authorities. We're fighting back. But even as they fought in court, the threats grew more serious. Someone slashed the tires on Maya's car. Someone left a dead rat on the doorstep of the safe house. Someone called her cell phone at 3 a.m. and whispered, "You should have taken the money and run." Catherine insisted on increasing security. Maya couldn't go anywhere without guards. She couldn't call her friends or visit her grandmother's grave. She was a prisoner, just like Vincent had been. One afternoon, David came to the safe house with news. "We've identified one of the men who came to your house that night. His name is Marcus Hale. He's a private security contractor, which is a polite way of saying he's a mercenary. He's been hired by people connected to the Whitmore family." "What does that mean?" Maya asked. "It means they're not just fighting this in court. They're fighting it on the ground. And Marcus Hale doesn't have a reputation for playing nice." Maya felt sick. "How do we stop him?" "We can't, not directly. But we can make sure the authorities know about him. If anything happens to you, he's the first person they'll look at. That's supposed to make me feel better." David sat down across from her. "Look, I know this is terrifying, but you have to understand something. You've already won the most important battle. The evidence is out. Federal prosecutors have it. The press knows about it. Even if something happens to you, even if they somehow make you disappear, the truth is still going to come out." "But I'll be dead," Maya said quietly. David didn't have an answer for that. That night, Maya sat alone in the safe house, staring at the walls. She thought about Vincent, about the 36 years he'd spent in fear. She thought about her grandmother, about the letter telling her to be brave. But what was brave about this? She wasn't fighting for justice. She was just trying to survive. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Miss Sullivan," a man's voice said. "You don't know me, but I know you, and I know what you're holding on to." Maya's blood ran cold. Who is this? Someone who wants to make you an offer. A better offer than before. $50 million. Half of it paid immediately. The rest when you turn over the documents and disappear. "I'm not interested." The man's voice hardened. "Then let me be clear about what happens if you refuse. Your lawyer, Catherine Morrison, her daughter is a sophomore at UC Berkeley. David Chen's father runs a restaurant in Chinatown. Ruth Sanders lives alone in a cottage with a garden. Are you understanding what I'm saying?" Maya's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "You're threatening them. People who have nothing to do with this. Everyone has something to do with this now. You made sure of that when you went public. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell your lawyers you've changed your mind. You're going to claim the money is yours by right of discovery. Then you're going to sell it to us for $50 million. And everyone walks away alive. And if I don't?" Then we start with Ruth. Elderly woman lives alone. Tragic break-in. Happens all the time. Then maybe Catherine's daughter has an accident. And we work our way through everyone you care about until you realize that no amount of justice is worth watching people die. The line went dead. Maya sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. They weren't bluffing. These people had already shown they were willing to use violence, and now they were threatening everyone she cared about. She called Catherine immediately and told her everything. Catherine's face went pale. "We need to notify the FBI," Catherine said. "This is a direct threat. They have to provide protection." "But will they?" Maya asked. "Can they protect everyone? Ruth, your daughter, David's father, anyone I've ever spoken to? Can they really keep everyone safe?" Catherine didn't answer because they both knew the truth. The people Maya was up against had resources, patience, and a willingness to do whatever it took to protect their secrets. And Maya was running out of options. 2 days later, Senator Whitmore held his own press conference. Standing behind a podium with the American flag at his back, He spoke with righteous indignation. "These accusations are not only false, they're offensive," he said. "My family built a respected financial firm that served this country for decades. Yes, there were problems in the 1970s. Yes, mistakes were made. But those responsible were held accountable at the time. This young woman's attempt to profit from 40-year-old scandals is nothing more than a shakedown. She's holding on to money that doesn't belong to her and using baseless accusations to legitimize her theft." The reporters ate it up. By that evening, the narrative had shifted. Now, Maya wasn't a whistleblower. She was an opportunist, a nobody trying to take down a respected public servant to cover her own greed. Maya watched the coverage from the safe house, feeling her hope drain away. How could she fight this? She had the truth, but they had power. She had evidence, but they had lawyers who could bury it in motions and appeals for years. And most importantly, they had proven they were willing to hurt innocent people to protect themselves. That night, Maya made a decision. She called Catherine. "I want to settle," Maya said. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I want to negotiate. I want to find a way to end this that doesn't get anyone killed." "Maya, if you back down now—" "I'm not backing down," Maya interrupted. "But I'm not going to let them hurt people I care about. There has to be a middle ground, some way to get justice without starting a war." Catherine sighed. "I'll reach out to their lawyers, see if there's room for discussion." 2 days later, Catherine called with news. They'd gotten a response. Senator Whitmore's legal team was willing to negotiate, but only on certain terms. Maya would retain the cash, $10 million, as compensation for her trouble. The rest of the money and all the documents would be turned over to a neutral third party who would determine how the assets should be distributed. In exchange, Maya would sign a non-disclosure agreement. She would never speak publicly about what she'd found. She would never pursue legal action against anyone connected to Whitmore and Associates. And she would disappear from public life. "It's a gag order," David said when they met to discuss it. "They're trying to silence you." "But people will still get their money back, right?" Maya asked. "The victims?" "Maybe," Catherine said, "if the neutral third party decides to distribute the assets that way. But there's no guarantee. They could tie it up in legal procedures for decades." "What's my other option?" Maya asked. "Keep fighting? Wait for them to hurt someone I care about? Live the rest of my life looking over my shoulder like Vincent did?" Neither lawyer answered. Maya looked out the window of Catherine's office, at the city below, at people going about their normal lives. She thought about her grandmother, about doing something brave. But sometimes the bravest thing wasn't fighting. Sometimes it was knowing when to let go. "I'll think about it," Maya said. "Give me 24 hours. That night, Maya returned to Pinewood Ridge for the first time in 2 weeks. She drove up Ridgeline Road with her security guards following behind. The house looked exactly as she'd left it, dark and imposing against the night sky. She went inside and walked through the rooms slowly. This place had changed her life, but not in the way she'd imagined. She'd thought buying it would be a fresh start. Instead, it had been the beginning of a nightmare. She climbed to the attic and stood in front of the safe. It was empty now, its contents secured by federal authorities, but the weight of what it had held still pressed down on her. Vincent had lived in fear for 36 years, protecting a secret that had consumed his entire life. And now Maya understood why. Some truths were too dangerous to tell. Some battles were too big to fight alone, but as she stood there in the darkness, something shifted inside her. She thought about Vincent's final journal entry. "I pray they're stronger than I was. I pray they have the courage to shine light into the darkness." Vincent had spent his entire life afraid. He'd hidden the truth instead of exposing it. And he'd died with his secret intact, accomplished nothing. Maya didn't want that. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life wondering what would have happened if she'd been brave enough to fight. She pulled out her phone and called Catherine. "I'm not settling," Maya said. "Tell them no deal. We're going forward with everything, every document, every name, every crime. Let them do their worst. I'm done being afraid." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "You're sure?" "No," Maya admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway. because sometimes being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing, even when you are. And Maya Sullivan, a 23-year-old girl who'd bought a house for $250 and stumbled into a 40-year-old conspiracy, was about to discover exactly how much courage she actually had. The war was just beginning, and this time she wasn't backing down. The decision to fight back changed everything. Within 48 hours of Maya refusing the settlement, Senator Whitmore's legal team filed 3 separate lawsuits. They claimed the money belonged to the Whitmore estate. They claimed Maya had no legal right to any of it. They demanded she be charged with theft and obstruction of justice. The media coverage intensified. Every day brought new headlines, new accusations, new attacks on Maya's character. But something else began to happen too. People started to pay attention to the real story, not the one Senator Whitmore wanted them to hear, but the truth Vincent had spent 36 years protecting. A newspaper in New York ran a detailed investigation into Whitmore and Associates. They interviewed former employees, reviewed old court records, tracked down investors who'd lost everything. The article painted a damning picture of systematic fraud that had destroyed hundreds of lives. Other news outlets picked up the story. Investigative journalists started digging deeper. They found connections between Whitmore and Associates and other financial scandals from the 1970s and 80s. They discovered that several politicians who'd received campaign donations from the firm had later pushed through legislation that benefited white-collar criminals. The narrative began to shift. Maya wasn't a greedy opportunist anymore. She was a whistleblower, a young woman who'd stumbled onto evidence of massive corruption and refused to be silenced. People who'd lost money to Whitmore and Associates started coming forward. Some were elderly now, in their 70s and 80s. Others were the children of investors who'd died broken. They shared their stories on social media, in newspaper interviews, on television. One woman, 74-year-old Margaret Chen from Queens, gave an interview that went viral. Her father had invested his life savings with Whitmore and Associates in 1972. When the firm collapsed, he lost everything. He died of a heart attack 2 years later, stress and despair having destroyed his health. "My father was a good man," Margaret said, tears streaming down her face. "He worked his entire life, and they stole it from him. They stole his dreams, his retirement, his peace of mind, and nobody ever paid for it." She looked directly into the camera. "This girl, Maya, she's the only person who's ever tried to get us justice, and they're destroying her for it." The interview was shared millions of times. Suddenly, public opinion swung dramatically in Maya's favor. People started showing up at Senator Whitmore's office demanding answers. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse where the lawsuits were being heard, carrying signs that read, "Justice for Vincent and Maya tells the truth." But with the support came increased danger. The threats against Maya intensified. Someone tried to break into the safe house, only to be stopped by the security guards Catherine had hired. Someone sent a package to Catherine's office that turned out to contain a brick and a note: "Drop the case, or next time it's a bomb." The FBI got involved, not just to investigate the financial crimes, but to protect Maya. 2 agents were assigned to her full-time. They moved her to a new location every few days. She couldn't have a routine, couldn't develop patterns, couldn't give anyone a chance to predict where she'd be. It was exhausting. Maya felt like she was living in a spy movie, except it wasn't exciting or glamorous. It was terrifying and lonely and soul-crushing. One night, 3 weeks after refusing the settlement, Maya sat in another anonymous safe house and wondered if she'd made the right choice. She'd wanted to honor Vincent's sacrifice, to bring justice to people who'd been wronged. But at what cost? She couldn't live like this forever. And even if the legal case succeeded, even if Senator Whitmore and his associates were held accountable, would it be worth the price she was paying? Catherine called that evening with news that changed everything. "We've got him," Catherine said, her voice trembling with excitement. "The federal prosecutors, they've been digging into Senator Whitmore's current finances, and they found something. He's been taking money from a shell corporation that traces back to the old Whitmore and Associates accounts. He's been laundering stolen money for 40 years. Maya sat up. "You mean he's still doing it? Even now?" "Even now." And because these are current crimes, there's no statute of limitations. They're going to arrest him. Maya, they're actually going to arrest him. 2 days later, Senator Richard Whitmore was taken into custody by federal agents. The footage of him being led out of his Georgetown home in handcuffs was broadcast on every news channel in the country. His carefully constructed image as a respected public servant crumbled in an instant. The arrest triggered a cascade of investigations. Other names from Vincent's documents were examined. Some were dead, but their estates could still be held liable. Others were alive and suddenly found themselves answering very uncomfortable questions from federal prosecutors. And the money, all $230 million of it, was officially seized as evidence in an ongoing criminal investigation. But Maya's legal troubles weren't over. Several parties filed claims to the money. The Whitmore estate, despite the senator's arrest, still claimed it belonged to them. Investors who'd lost money in the original scandal filed claims. Even the IRS got involved, arguing that taxes should be paid on the assets. Catherine and David fought every claim. They argued that Maya had acted as a good-faith whistleblower. They pointed out that she'd never tried to keep the money for herself. They demonstrated that she'd cooperated fully with authorities from the beginning. The legal battle dragged on for months. Maya testified in multiple hearings. She sat through depositions where hostile lawyers tried to trip her up, to find inconsistencies in her story, to paint her as an unreliable witness. But Maya never wavered. She told the truth, simple and clear. She'd bought a house. She'd found a safe. She'd discovered evidence of crimes. And she'd done the right thing by bringing it to light. Slowly, the judges and prosecutors began to see what Catherine and David had known from the beginning. Maya Sullivan wasn't the criminal in this story. She was the hero. 9 months after Maya first opened Vincent's safe, the federal court issued its ruling. The money would be placed in a restitution fund. Every investor who'd lost money to Whitmore and Associates or their surviving family members would be able to file a claim. An independent administrator would review each claim and distribute funds accordingly. It wouldn't be a full recovery. Many of the original investors were dead and their heirs couldn't be located. Some had lost more than the fund could repay. But it was something. It was justice, delayed but not denied. And the court ruled on one more critical point. Maya Sullivan was entitled to a whistleblower reward of 15% of the recovered assets for her role in exposing the fraud. 15% of $230 million was $34.5 million. Maya sat in Catherine's office when she heard the news, too stunned to speak. $34 million. More money than she could have imagined when she'd spent $250 on a crumbling house in the mountains. "But you're going to give it away, aren't you?" David said, smiling slightly. He'd gotten to know Maya well enough to predict her answer. Maya nodded slowly. "Most of it. I want to set up a foundation, something that helps people who've been victims of financial fraud, something that would make Vincent proud." Catherine smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." The Vincent Mercer Justice Foundation was established 6 months later. Maya used $25 million to create an endowment. The foundation would provide legal assistance to whistleblowers, support for fraud victims, and education programs to help people protect themselves from financial scams. She kept $5 million for herself, not because she wanted to be rich, but because she'd learned that security mattered. She bought a small house in Denver, nothing fancy, just a place that was truly hers. She set up a trust that would pay for any children she might have someday to go to college, and she put the rest in conservative investments that would provide a modest income for the rest of her life. She donated the rest, $4.5 million, to various charities, organizations that helped the elderly, that supported financial literacy programs, that provided legal aid to those who couldn't afford it. The stone log house in Pinewood Ridge she kept. Not to live in, but to preserve. She turned it into a museum dedicated to Vincent's memory. The hidden room, the safe, the documents, all of it was preserved exactly as it had been. Visitors could tour the house and learn about Vincent's story, about the courage it took to stand against corruption, about the price he paid for doing what was right. Ruth helped Maya set up the museum. Together, they created exhibits that told the full story. Not just the financial fraud, but the human cost. Photos of families who'd lost everything, letters from people who'd been devastated by the scandal, and Vincent's journal displayed in a glass case so visitors could read his own words about the 36 years he'd spent in hiding. The museum opened on a crisp October morning, almost exactly 2 years after Maya had first walked through those doors. Hundreds of people came, including many of the fraud victims who'd received restitution from the fund. Margaret Chen, the woman whose viral interview had helped turn public opinion, cut the ribbon. "This isn't just a museum," Margaret said, her voice strong despite her age. "This is a reminder that ordinary people can stand up to extraordinary evil, that truth matters, that justice, even when it takes 40 years, is worth fighting for." Maya stood beside her, tears streaming down her face. She thought about her grandmother, about the letter that had told her to do something brave. She thought about Vincent, about the man who'd sacrificed everything to protect the truth. And she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From an eviction notice to a $250 auction bid to standing in front of hundreds of people who believed in what she'd done. Life in Denver was different for Maya now. She couldn't walk down the street without being recognized. Some people praised her. Others, particularly those loyal to Senator Whitmore, still viewed her with suspicion. But Maya had learned to live with the attention. She'd learned that doing the right thing didn't always make you popular, but it did make you able to sleep at night. Senator Whitmore was convicted on 14 counts of fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Several of his associates received similar sentences. The Whitmore name, once respected in financial and political circles, became synonymous with corruption and greed. The investors who received restitution sent Maya letters, hundreds of them. They thanked her for giving them closure, for proving that what had happened to them mattered, for showing them that someone cared. One letter in particular stayed with Maya. It was from a man named Robert, whose father had committed suicide after losing everything to Whitmore and Associates. Robert had been 12 years old when his father died. He'd spent his entire adult life believing his father was weak, that he'd given up too easily. "But your courage helped me understand," Robert wrote. "My father wasn't weak. He was destroyed by criminals who faced no consequences. You gave those criminals consequences. You gave my father justice, and you gave me the ability to remember him with pride instead of shame. Thank you." Maya kept that letter in her desk drawer. On days when she doubted herself, when she wondered if the fight had been worth it, she'd read it again and remember why she'd refused to back down. The foundation grew quickly. Within a year, it had helped 37 whistleblowers navigate legal challenges. It had provided financial assistance to over 200 fraud victims. And it had launched education programs in schools across Colorado, teaching young people about financial literacy and the importance of standing up for what's right. Maya became the foundation's director. She worked long hours, traveled constantly, and poured her heart into making sure Vincent's sacrifice meant something. But unlike Vincent, she didn't do it alone. She surrounded herself with people who believed in the mission. Catherine and David both joined the foundation's board. Ruth became a special advisor, sharing Vincent's story with anyone who would listen. And slowly, Maya began to heal. The nightmares faded. The constant looking over her shoulder eased. She started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a normal life again. 3 years after opening the safe, Maya returned to Pinewood Ridge on a quiet spring afternoon. She walked through the museum, now professionally run by a small staff. Visitors were sparse on a Tuesday, just a few tourists and a school group on a field trip. She climbed to the attic, to the hidden room where the safe still stood. It was empty now, its door permanently open, a symbol of secrets revealed rather than kept. Maya ran her hand along the cold metal, thinking about the moment she'd first seen it. She'd been terrified, alone, desperate. She'd thought finding money would solve all her problems. She'd been so naive. The money hadn't solved anything. It had created challenges she never could have imagined. But it had also given her something more valuable than wealth, It had given her purpose. She pulled out her phone and called Ruth. The elderly woman answered on the second ring, her voice as warm as always. "I'm at the house," Maya said. "Just wanted to hear your voice. You getting sentimental on me, child?" "Maybe a little." Ruth laughed softly. "Vincent would be proud of you. You know that, don't you? You did what he couldn't. You brought the truth into the light." "Do you think he's at peace now?" Maya asked. "Wherever he is." "I think he's dancing," Ruth said. "Finally free after all those years of fear. Free because someone was brave enough to finish what he started." They talked for a few more minutes before saying goodbye. Maya stood at the window of the attic, looking out over the mountains. The same view Vincent had seen for 36 years. The same trees, the same sky, the same isolation. But Maya didn't feel isolated. She felt connected. To Vincent, to the victims who'd received justice, to everyone who'd been told their pain didn't matter and refused to believe it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. The Foundation had just received a new case, a corporate whistleblower who was being threatened for exposing safety violations. They needed Maya's guidance. Maya smiled. This was her life now. Not running from danger, but running toward justice. Not hiding truth, but exposing it. She took one last look at the safe, then turned and walked down the stairs. There was work to do. There were always people who needed help, always battles that needed fighting. And Maya Sullivan, the girl who'd bought a ghost for $250, was ready for all of it. 6 months later, Maya was invited to speak at a conference on financial crimes. The venue was packed with lawyers, prosecutors, and advocates from around the country. She stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, and felt the weight of everything that had brought her to this moment. "My name is Maya Sullivan," she began. "And 4 years ago, I was broke, grieving, and desperate. I bought a house at auction for $250 because I had nowhere else to go. I thought I was buying shelter. Instead, I bought a secret that would change my life and the lives of hundreds of others." She told the story, all of it. The safe, the money, the documents, the threats, the fear, but also the triumph, the justice, the foundation, the lives that had been changed. "When I found that safe," she said, "I thought I'd found treasure. And in a way I had. But not the kind I expected. The real treasure wasn't the money. It was the opportunity to do something that mattered. To stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. To prove that truth is more powerful than corruption, no matter how long corruption has been hiding." She paused, looking out at the audience. Vincent Mercer spent 36 years in fear because he held on to truth that powerful people wanted buried. He died never knowing if his sacrifice meant anything. But it did. It meant everything. Because that truth didn't die with him. It waited in the darkness until someone was brave enough to bring it into the light. The audience rose to its feet, applause thundering through the hall. Maya stood at the podium, overwhelmed by the response, and realized something profound. She'd spent so long thinking of herself as ordinary, just a girl who'd gotten lucky or unlucky, depending on how you looked at it. Just someone who'd stumbled into an extraordinary situation. But that wasn't true. She'd made choices. She'd chosen to investigate when she could have ignored the safe. She'd chosen to fight when she could have taken the money and run. She'd chosen to honor Vincent's memory when she could have dismissed him as a paranoid old man. Those choices had defined her. Not the money, not the fame, not even the justice that had been served. The choices themselves were what mattered. After the conference, several whistleblowers approached Maya. They shared their stories, their fears, their struggles, and Maya listened to each one, offering advice, support, and the promise that they weren't alone. This was her calling now. Not wealth, not security, not comfort, but standing beside people who'd found the courage to speak truth to power and needed someone to believe in them. That evening, Maya sat in her hotel room and opened her laptop. She started writing a book, not about the money or the legal battles, but about Vincent, about a man who'd given up everything to preserve evidence of wrongdoing. About 36 years of sacrifice that had finally, eventually, meant something. She titled it The Keeper of Secrets, the Vincent Mercer story. The book was published 18 months later. It became a bestseller, not because of the sensational elements, but because Maya had written it with such honesty and heart. Readers connected with Vincent's story, with his fear and isolation, with his hope that someday someone would care enough to finish what he'd started. All the proceeds from the book went to the foundation, every single dollar. Maya didn't need the money, and she knew Vincent wouldn't have wanted it. He'd want it to help others, to create change, to make sure his story inspired action rather than just sympathy. The foundation expanded its reach. It opened offices in 3 more cities. It hired investigators to help whistleblowers gather evidence. It provided safe houses for people whose lives were threatened because they'd stood up for what was right. And at the center of it all was Maya, no longer a scared 23-year-old, but a confident leader who'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to move forward despite it. 5 years after finding the safe, Maya returned to Pinewood Ridge for the anniversary celebration of the museum. The town had changed. The museum had brought tourists, and tourists had brought revenue. New shops had opened. Old buildings had been renovated. The place had a vitality it hadn't had in decades. Ruth met her at the museum entrance, older now but still sharp as ever. They walked through the exhibits together, reading the placards, looking at the photographs. "You brought this town back to life," Ruth said softly. "Just like you brought Vincent's story to life." "Vincent brought the town back," Maya corrected. "I just helped people remember why his story mattered." That night, the town held a dinner in Maya's honor. Everyone came, locals who'd known Vincent, victims who'd received restitution, people who'd been inspired by the story. They filled the community center, sharing food and memories and gratitude. Margaret Chen flew in from New York. She was 80 now, frailer but still fierce. She stood and raised her glass in a toast. "To Maya Sullivan," Margaret said, her voice carrying through the room, "who proved that one person with courage can change the world. Who showed us that justice delayed is not justice denied. And who honored my father's memory in a way I never thought possible." Everyone raised their glasses. Maya stood, tears streaming down her face, and looked at the faces around her. These weren't just people who'd been helped by the foundation. They were a community built on the belief that doing the right thing mattered. "Thank you," Maya said simply. "But this isn't about me. It's about all of us, about what we can accomplish when we refuse to let fear win. When we stand together and say that truth matters more than comfort, that justice matters more than convenience." She raised her glass higher. "To Vincent Mercer, the keeper of secrets who trusted that someday someone would care enough to set those secrets free." "To Vincent," the room chorused. Years passed. The foundation grew. The museum became a destination for school groups and tourists from around the world. Senator Whitmore died in prison, unrepentant to the end. Other criminals named in Vincent's documents faced justice, some legal and some simply the court of public opinion. And Maya lived a life she never could have imagined when she'd bid $250 on a house she couldn't afford. She didn't marry, though she dated occasionally. Her life was too full, too focused, too dedicated to the mission Vincent had unknowingly passed to her. But she wasn't lonely. She was surrounded by people who believed in what she believed in, who fought for what she fought for. On the 10th anniversary of finding the safe, Maya stood in the attic of the stone log house and recorded a video. She posted it to the Foundation's website, to social media, everywhere she could reach people. "My name is Maya Sullivan," she said to the camera, "and 10 years ago I bought this house for $250. I thought I was buying shelter. Instead, I bought a secret that would define the rest of my life." She walked to the safe and placed her hand on its cold metal surface. This safe held $230 million. But it held something more valuable too. It held proof that even when the world seems rigged against ordinary people, even when powerful institutions seem untouchable, the truth can still win. She looked directly into the camera. "If you found this video because you're struggling, because you're afraid, because you've seen something wrong and don't know if you have the courage to speak up, let me tell you something. You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone. There are people who will stand with you, organizations that will protect you, laws that will defend you, and most importantly, there's a whole community of people who've walked this path before you and come out the other side. She smiled. I was 23 years old, broke and terrified. I had every reason to walk away, but I didn't. And that decision, that one moment of choosing courage over fear, it didn't just change my life. It changed hundreds of lives, maybe thousands. So whatever you're facing, whatever secret you're holding, whatever truth you're afraid to tell, remember this. One person with courage can change the world. Vincent Mercer proved it, and so can you. The video went viral. It was shared millions of times. It inspired new whistleblowers to come forward, new victims to seek justice, new believers to support the cause. And Maya, watching the responses pour in, realized something that filled her with profound gratitude. She'd thought buying that house was the biggest risk she'd ever take. But it wasn't. The biggest risk was choosing to fight when every instinct told her to run. Choosing truth when lies would have been easier. Choosing justice when silence would have been safer. That was the real treasure Vincent had left behind. Not money, but proof that courage still mattered. That ordinary people could still defeat extraordinary corruption. That one person, armed with nothing but truth and determination, could change the world. Anyone can find fortune if they're lucky. But Maya Sullivan had found something far more valuable. She'd found purpose. She'd found her calling. She'd found proof that sometimes the poorest little girl who buys an odd stone log home for pennies can end up richer than the powerful men who tried to silence her. Because wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in lives changed, in justice served, in truth protected. And by that measure, Maya Sullivan had become one of the richest people in the world. Not because of what she'd found in Vincent Mercer's safe, but because of what she'd done with it. She'd honored a stranger's sacrifice. She'd fought when fighting seemed impossible. She'd built something meaningful from a discovery that could have destroyed her. And in doing so, she'd proven that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't hidden in safes waiting to be found. They're hidden in our own hearts, waiting for us to be brave enough to let them out. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories that will move you. Click to ride with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe ordinary courage can create extraordinary change.